Chosen ones. What if the reason you feel like nothing is happening is because the deepest part of your transformation was never meant to be visible at first? What if God is doing something within you right now that does not look dramatic? No sudden miracle, no obvious sign, no moment where everything suddenly makes sense, just silence, a strange distance from the person you used to be. A feeling that something inside you is changing, even though you cannot explain what it is. And perhaps that is exactly why this message found you. Because there are seasons when God does not change your circumstances first. He changes you, quietly, deeply. And sometimes, the most important work happens in you long before anything around you begins to look different. You may have been asking yourself, why do I still feel the same? Why haven't I seen the change I was hoping for? Why does it seem like everyone else is moving forward while I am still waiting? Maybe you expected renewal to feel powerful. You expected peace to suddenly flood your mind. You expected your confidence to return overnight. You expected a sign so obvious that you could never question it. But what if renewal does not always arrive with a feeling? What if sometimes the first evidence of change is simply that you no longer respond to life the way you used to? Think about that for a moment. Maybe there are things that once controlled your emotions that no longer have the same power. Maybe you are beginning to recognize patterns you could not see before. Maybe you are becoming tired of conversations that once entertained you. Maybe you are becoming less interested in proving yourself. Maybe you have started protecting your peace instead of chasing approval. And maybe you have interpreted all of this as loneliness, confusion, or emotional exhaustion. But perhaps there is another way to understand it. Perhaps something inside you is being renewed, not necessarily in a way you can measure, not necessarily in a way you can explain, but in a way that slowly changes what you desire, what you tolerate, what you believe, and how you see yourself. This is the part many people miss. They look for external evidence of an internal process. They look at their bank account, their relationships, their circumstances, their opportunities, their unanswered prayers. And when those things do not change immediately, they assume God is doing nothing but spiritual renewal can begin beneath the surface. A seed does not look like a tree while it is growing underground. And just because you cannot see movement does not mean there is no movement. That does not mean every difficult moment is automatically a divine sign. It means that a season of waiting can sometimes become a place where deeper changes begin. And perhaps you have been in that place longer than you expected. You may have wondered why certain things had to fall apart, why certain people became distant, why opportunities disappeared, why the version of yourself you once knew suddenly started feeling unfamiliar. You may have even prayed, God, please change my life. But perhaps the answer began with something much quieter. Let me change you first. Not because you were broken beyond repair, not because you were unworthy, but because sometimes we ask for a new life while still carrying the mindset, fears, habits, and wounds of the old one. And renewal begins when those old things slowly lose their grip. That process can be uncomfortable, because you may not recognize yourself while you are becoming someone different. You may feel caught between who you were and who you are becoming. That middle place can feel empty, but empty does not always mean abandoned. Sometimes it means there is room for something new. So if you have been feeling strangely disconnected from your old life, don't immediately assume that something is wrong with you. Pause. Look deeper. Ask yourself, what has changed inside me, even if my circumstances have not changed yet? Maybe your answer is small. Maybe you are calmer. Maybe you are more reflective. Maybe you are less desperate for people's approval. Maybe you are beginning to walk away from things that once drained you. Maybe you are simply becoming more honest with yourself. That matters, because renewal often begins with awareness. And once you begin seeing what is changing inside you, you may understand why the silence has felt so different. If you've been experiencing a change you could not explain, tell me about it in the comments. You don't need to share anything private. Just describe the change in one sentence. Sometimes putting it into words helps you recognize how far you've already come. But there is something deeper here, because if God is renewing you in secret, why would the process feel so invisible? Why would you have to go through a season where you cannot clearly see the results? And the answer may change the way you understand this entire season. Because perhaps the hidden part is not a punishment. Perhaps it is protection. There are some changes that cannot safely happen in public. Think about a foundation. You can build a beautiful house, but before anyone sees the walls, the foundation has to be established beneath the ground. Nobody celebrates the foundation. Nobody stands around watching it every day. Nobody looks at a piece of concrete underground and says, Look how beautiful this is. But without it, everything above it becomes unstable. Perhaps your current season has felt like that. Quiet, hidden, unrecognized. You may be waiting for something visible to happen, while the deeper work is happening where nobody else can see it. And perhaps that is why you have felt frustrated, because people naturally want evidence. We want to know that our prayers are working. We want to know that our waiting has meaning. We want to know that the difficult season is leading somewhere. But spiritual renewal does not always give you immediate evidence. Sometimes it first changes the person who will eventually receive what they have been praying for. And that distinction matters. Imagine receiving everything you wanted while remaining exactly the same person you were before. Would it actually bring peace? A new opportunity cannot automatically heal an old insecurity. A new relationship cannot automatically remove an old fear. More money cannot automatically create wisdom. A new environment cannot automatically change the patterns you carry inside. External change without internal renewal can simply create new circumstances around an unchanged heart. And perhaps this is why the process has felt slower than you wanted. Maybe the question was never only, when will my situation change? Maybe another question was quietly forming underneath it. Who am I becoming while I wait? That is a harder question, because it forces you to look inward. It asks you to notice what you are learning, what you are releasing, what you are becoming less willing to accept, what you are beginning to understand. And sometimes the evidence of renewal is not that you suddenly feel powerful. It is that something that once controlled you no longer controls you in the same way. You still feel the emotion, but you respond differently. You still experience disappointment, but it does not destroy your identity. You still have questions, but you do not need every answer immediately. You still have moments of fear, but fear no longer gets to make every decision. That is a different kind of strength, and it can be so quiet that you overlook it. Maybe you have been measuring your growth by what you have received, but what if you also measured it by what you have stopped needing? The approval you used to chase, the attention you used to crave, the arguments you used to continue, the people you used to convince, the situations you used to force, the version of yourself you kept trying to prove. Maybe you are slowly releasing them, and you thought you were losing something, but perhaps you were making space. There is another reason hidden renewal can feel confusing. When an old identity starts fading, there can be a period where the new identity has not fully formed yet. You know what you no longer want, but you don't completely know what you want instead. You know where you don't belong, but you are not sure where you are going. You feel different, but you cannot explain why. That uncertainty can feel like being lost, but it can also be a transition. The old patterns are becoming less comfortable. The new patterns are becoming more natural, and somewhere between them is a season of adjustment. This is why you should not judge your entire life by how you feel in one season. A difficult emotional day does not erase your growth. A quiet week does not mean nothing is happening. A delayed answer does not automatically mean rejection, and feeling spiritually tired does not necessarily mean you have failed. Sometimes renewal requires honesty. Maybe you need to admit that you are tired. Maybe you need to stop pretending that everything is fine. Maybe you need to release the pressure to understand every detail. Maybe you need to allow yourself to grow slowly, because God does not need you to manufacture a transformation. You do not have to force yourself into a new identity overnight. You can take the next step, then another, and let the process unfold. If you have been in a season where you feel caught between your old life and something new, you can write, "I am becoming new," in the comments if that genuinely reflects what you are experiencing, not as a magical formula, not as a promise that everything will change tomorrow, just as a simple acknowledgement that you recognize the process, because recognizing the process changes how you experience it. Instead of saying, "Nothing is happening," you begin asking, "What is changing that I have not noticed?" And that question opens another door, because there are signs of renewal that are easy to miss. They do not always look spiritual. They can appear in ordinary decisions, ordinary reactions, ordinary moments, and once you learn to recognize them, you may look back at the last few months differently. That is what we are going to explore next. The first sign may be something you would never expect. You are becoming less comfortable with what once felt normal, not because you suddenly think you are better than anyone else, not because you have all the answers, but because your priorities are changing. A conversation that once consumed your attention may now leave you empty. A habit you once defended may suddenly feel exhausting. A relationship dynamic you once tolerated may no longer feel healthy. A goal you once thought was everything may no longer carry the same meaning, and you might think, why am I changing? But perhaps the better question is, what is this change revealing about me? What renewal can change your appetite, what you seek, what you value, what you allow into your mind, what you spend your energy on. You may begin craving peace more than attention, depth more than popularity, truth more than validation, purpose more than applause. And these changes can happen so gradually that you do not notice them until one day you realize, I am not the same person anymore. That moment can be powerful, because sometimes you are waiting for God to give you a new life while He's teaching you how to recognize the life you already have differently. The second sign is that you are becoming more honest. You stop pretending. You stop saying yes when your heart is screaming no. You stop pretending certain things do not hurt. You stop hiding from questions you have avoided for years. You begin looking at yourself without constantly defending yourself. That kind of honesty can feel uncomfortable, but it can also be the beginning of healing, because you cannot renew what you refuse to acknowledge. The third sign is that your reaction time changes. Something happens. You feel the emotion. But before you react, there is a pause. That pause may be tiny, but it matters. Once, anger controlled the entire conversation. Now you breathe. Once, rejection made you question your worth. Now you remind yourself that one person's decision does not define your identity. Once, uncertainty made you panic. Now you can sit with uncertainty without immediately trying to escape it. That is growth, not perfection. Growth. And maybe this is one of the things you have failed to recognize. You are looking for a dramatic feeling, but your renewal may be showing itself through your responses. The fourth sign is that you are becoming less desperate to force outcomes. This one can be difficult, because waiting can make you want to control everything. You want the answer now, the relationship now, the opportunity now, the explanation now, the breakthrough now. But slowly you may begin to realize that forcing something does not make it right. You can work hard without becoming obsessed. You can hope without becoming desperate. You can pray without demanding that the answer arrive on your schedule. You can move forward without knowing every detail of what comes next. That is a deeper kind of peace, and perhaps you are learning it now. The fifth sign is that you are beginning to understand your past differently. This does not mean pretending painful experiences were good. It means refusing to let them become the final definition of who you are. You can look back and say, that hurt me. But also, it taught me something. You can say, I lost something. And also, I discovered something about myself. You can say, I made mistakes. And also, I am not required to remain the person who made them. That is renewal, not erasing the past, changing your relationship with it. And there may be another sign that is even more important. You are beginning to choose what is healthy, even when nobody applauds you for it. You choose rest. You choose boundaries. You choose honesty. You choose patience. You choose to walk away instead of constantly proving your point. You choose peace instead of winning every argument. You choose growth instead of staying comfortable. Nobody may notice, but you notice, and perhaps God sees the quiet decisions that nobody else sees. The moments when you could have returned to the old pattern but chose differently. The moment when you could have reacted but remained calm. The moment when you could have chased someone but allowed them to go. The moment when you could have abandoned your values because you were lonely, but you stayed true to what you believed. Those moments may not feel dramatic, but they can become the building blocks of a new life. So, if you've been asking, where is the renewal? Look beyond the obvious. Look at your reactions, your priorities, your boundaries, your patience, your desires, your ability to let go, your ability to remain steady when you do not have all the answers. If those things are changing, perhaps something is already happening. And there is one final piece. Because once you understand that renewal can happen before you feel renewed, you begin to see why the silence itself may have had a purpose. You were not necessarily waiting for the process to begin. You may have been waiting to recognize that it had already begun. Chosen one, maybe the greatest misunderstanding about renewal is thinking that you will always feel renewed while it is happening. You may not. There will be mornings when you still feel tired. There will be days when old fears return. There may be moments when you question everything. There may be times when you look at your life and think, nothing has changed. But feelings are not always the best measurement of growth. A tree does not stop growing because you cannot see it growing. A foundation does not become less important because it is underground. And a person does not stop changing simply because the transformation is quiet. Perhaps the renewal God is leading you toward is not about becoming a completely different human being. Perhaps it is about becoming more deeply who you were meant to be. More honest, more grounded, more patient, more aware, more compassionate, more discerning, more willing to release what no longer belongs in your life, more capable of receiving good things without allowing them to become your identity. That kind of transformation takes time, and maybe that is why the title matters. God is renewing you in secret, not because you are being hidden forever, but because some things need to become strong before they become visible. Your character needs roots. Your peace needs roots. Your faith needs roots. Your identity needs roots. Otherwise, the moment circumstances change, you may return to the same fears that controlled you before. So perhaps this season is not simply about waiting for something to happen to you. Perhaps it is about becoming someone who can walk through what happens next with greater wisdom. And that changes the question. Instead of asking, when will everything finally change? Ask, what is being changed in me while I wait? Instead of asking, why can't I feel anything? Ask, what have I started doing differently? Instead of saying, God has forgotten me. Pause and consider, could I be in a season where the deepest work is happening quietly? You do not have to force yourself to believe that everything is perfect. You do not have to deny your pain. You do not have to pretend that waiting is easy. Faith does not require pretending. You can be tired and still have hope. You can be confused and still keep moving. You can have questions and still trust the process. You can admit that you do not understand what God is doing without deciding that nothing is happening. That is a mature kind of faith. And perhaps that is part of your renewal too. You are learning to live without needing constant proof. You are learning that silence does not automatically mean absence. You are learning that delay does not automatically mean denial. You are learning that one difficult chapter does not determine the ending of your story. And maybe the reason this message feels personal is not because someone knows every detail of your life. It is because many people experience seasons like this. Seasons where the outside looks almost the same, but something inside has started to shift. If you can honestly say that you have noticed even one small change in yourself, hold on to that awareness. Maybe you are calmer than you used to be. Maybe you recover faster. Maybe you no longer chase the same people. Maybe you no longer need the same approval. Maybe you have started protecting your peace. Maybe you are finally listening to your conscience. Maybe you have begun asking deeper questions. Maybe you simply feel less connected to the person you were. Do not dismiss those things simply because they are small. Small changes can become powerful patterns, and powerful patterns can eventually shape an entirely different life. So if you feel that you are somewhere between your old self and a new chapter, you can write, "I trust the process," in the comments. Not because you know exactly what tomorrow will bring, but because you are choosing not to let today's uncertainty define your entire future. And if this message helped you recognize something about yourself, stay connected to this channel. Subscribe if you want more messages centered on faith, spiritual growth, reflection, and the journey of becoming who God is calling you to become. But before you leave, remember this. You do not have to feel different every day to be changing. You do not have to see every result to know that your choices matter. You do not have to understand every delay to keep moving forward, and you do not have to become perfect before you can begin again. Perhaps the renewal you have been waiting to feel has already started in the quietest places, in the way you think, in the way you respond, in the things you no longer tolerate, in the things you are finally willing to release, in the peace you are learning to protect, in the patience you are developing, in the identity you are slowly rebuilding. Maybe you have been looking toward the horizon waiting for God to change everything around you, and perhaps all along, the first part of the answer was happening within you, quietly, secretly, one decision at a time, one realization at a time, one surrendered fear at a time, one new response at a time. So do not judge the entire journey by what you feel today. Today may simply be one page, The story is not finished because you cannot see the next page. Keep walking, keep growing, keep seeking God, keep allowing yourself to become healthier, wiser, and more grounded. And when the time comes to look back, you may realize something you could not see while you were living through it. You were not standing still, you were becoming. You were not forgotten, you were being formed. You were not necessarily empty,